So your parents always really value traditional education. Was there any tension when you were growing up where you really wanted to go after your entrepreneurial ambitions?
I can remember being 11 years old, lying in bed at night reading whatever business books I could get my hands on.
Matt Haycox, a serial entrepreneur who went from running one of the largest events businesses in the UK to filing for bankruptcy, to then bounce back and provide over £500 million of investment to UK companies.
The world was just a very different place, and as much as I wanted to go off in the entrepreneurial direction, but now understand from my parents' perspective that if you didn't have a university degree, you couldn't even get an interview. You know, why is your daughter going to uni if you don't believe in uni? And it's not that I don't believe in uni, it's that I believe in the right path or the best path or the fastest path for what the outcome you want is.
I think the role model thing is really important as well. I wonder how much someone would pay now to be given a business that's struggling and say you've got 3 years just to learn and see what happens. Way more valuable than uni these days, I would have thought. I've got a quick favour to ask you. Nearly 90% of people listening to this podcast right now don't follow or subscribe to us. And my goal is to get that down to 80%. So if you've ever liked an episode or a clip that we've put out, please could you click that follow or subscribe button. It helps us more than you know to bring more guests onto the podcast and put out better and better content for you. Thank you. Before we dive into this episode, I want to take a second to speak about our sponsor, Pith Stem, who we are thrilled to have on this journey with us. As someone who is always looking for ways to improve my healthy hustle, Pith Stem's DropTop desk stood out to me as the best full work-from-home solution on the market. The world of work from home is changing, and a laptop or screen perched on your lap or dining room table isn't enough anymore. It's imperative that we have a solution at home that matches our productivity station that we can have in our office. But of course, homes weren't made to be worked in, and not all of us want a dedicated study. That's why I'm so happy that Pith Stem created this perfect solution. They designed this desk with both the needs of the professional and their home in mind. It's perfect because it allows me to have a full productivity station that suits my needs and helps me get the most out of every minute that I spend at it, not only so I work comfortably, but that I actually enjoy it. And the best thing about DropTop, I can close and lock it at the end of the day to keep work and home separate. And it looks awesome on the wall. You can get your DropTop desk anywhere in the world from pithandstem.com or just Google DropTop and you'll find it pretty quickly. So your parents always really value traditional education. They really wanted to push you towards university and different courses. Was there any tension when you were growing up where you really wanted to go after your entrepreneurial ambitions?
I mean, it wasn't swords at dawn tension. You know, we weren't, I wasn't going to pack my bags and move out of the house in the middle of the night. But it was definitely we both wanted to go in different directions tension. And when you're a kid or when you're younger and when you're in the moment of something, you never really want to appreciate anybody else's point of view. And I think also back then, I probably could never have appreciated that point of view. But I think for people listening to this now, you've got to understand that we're talking 25 years ago, the world was just a very different place. And as much as I wanted to go off in the entrepreneurial direction because that's what I wanted to do, I also now understand from my parents' perspective that up until maybe 2000, certainly the early 2000s, if you did not have some kind of formal qualification, if you hadn't been to university, I mean, not only were you really considered a failure to your parents, particularly if you'd already been through private education, because it was like, well, what's the point in doing private education for school if you're not then going to go and follow that on with university? But if you didn't have a university degree, you couldn't even get an interview in any of the mainstream business. You couldn't get an interview in any kind of corporate business. Now, I never cared about that because I was like, well, I'm never going to work in corporate. You know, I'll be fine. You know, my backup plan is myself anyway, so I don't need a backup plan. But no, from their perspective, I think there was two angles to it. One was my mum was romantically attached to education. I think, you know, she just had this big thing about classics in education and professors, etc. But you know, just from a purely practical perspective, you know, they wanted me to not fail in the real world.
It's really interesting as well because before we started recording, you're talking about how your daughter's looking at different universities, right? So it's almost like university is just, it's a good railroad for parents just to keep trying to look after their kids. It's not necessarily that they're weighing up uni is good or bad for you. It's just they're going, this will hopefully keep you on the right track for a little bit longer. Does that relate to what your parents took a view of you?
I mean, I was going to answer the question in a slightly different way, as in not so much with my parents, but with my daughter now. because I think a lot of people will be like, well, why is your daughter going to uni if you don't believe in uni? And it's not that I don't believe in uni, it's that I believe in the right path or the best path or the fastest path for what the outcome you want is. And I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I want that now. And if my daughter wanted to be an entrepreneur, I think I'd probably be having very different conversations with her. Not necessarily saying you're not going to university, but wanting her to understand that is spending those 3 or 4 years of her life and the money that goes with it really going to get her to where she wants to be. But as I was saying to you, she wants to be an aerospace engineer, as I think, because it's way above my pay grade, all that kind of stuff. But if you want to be in that space, then the only place to get that education, the only place to go down that route is university. So it's not that uni as a concept is bad. It's that, what is the right vehicle to get you to the destination that you want to go in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting point. And I'm interested in, because obviously not all entrepreneurs, not all people in general are exposed to entrepreneurship or business from a young age. But your father had a business, right? And I've seen you speak about before and write about you trying to sit in on client meetings or conversations you'd have with your mother around the dinner table talking about business. And was that something that sparked your interest in business from a young age?
I think it must have done.
Yeah.
I mean I don't remember this one particular event where it was like, I'd always wanted to be a football player, and then I heard my dad fire someone and I was so excited. I thought that's how I'm going to spend the rest of my life. But I think being in that environment must have made me like business. The other thing was that, again, in the same way that back in the, let's say, 90s and 80s, that the only way to kind of secure your future was to go to uni. The other perception at that time, potential, almost reality, was that the only way to make big money was to own your own business. And I think my original driver was probably more money than it was business. Certainly, I can remember from being 8 years old, anyone I'd be saying to my mum, is he a millionaire? Is he a millionaire? And it was normally like an actor or a magician or we'll talk about magic, I'm sure, but because I just wanted to earn money. And I think, coupled with the fact that I had this, almost like pathological obsession with making money, coupled with the fact that the only real way perceived to do it was to own your own business, not to work for someone else. That probably made me think in that direction, coupled with the fact that my dad had his own business, and it just became my interest, and I can, as much as I can remember being 8 years old asking if someone was a millionaire, I can remember being 11 years old plus, lying in bed at night reading, whatever business books I could get my hands on, which, again, putting that into context, when you say 30 years ago reading whatever business books I can get my hands on, it was, which 2 or 3 hardbacks did I find in my dad's library? I mean, there was no, there was no proliferation. I mean, I went on Amazon 2 nights ago to order myself a few books. Just bing, 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 bing. I ordered like 15 books without thinking that'll be there 24 hours later. I mean, that's probably more books in 24 hours than I got to read in, 24 months as a kid.
It's wild, isn't it? And I think the role model thing is really important as well. I think, I didn't have entrepreneurs around me when I was growing up, but so when I say I was interested in business, I think what I mean, and it kind of relates to what I've seen you talk about, is I was just interested in problem solving. And you see people making money, and my not role model, but the person I always thought was rich, quote unquote, was Alan Sugar on a Wednesday night, right?
That was one of these books I read.
Really?
It was the Amstrad Way, I think it was called.
Yeah. So how funny is that? So you look at him and you go, well, he's worth, is he a billionaire?
I think so.
Yeah. So you look at him and go, he's the richest guy because he's on TV, he's hiring and firing people. But it's a very linear way to look at business. And I didn't even think I understood business at all. I wanted to be in business, but what I thought about was just trying to solve tiny problems, which is similar, I guess, to what you've did, because you dabbled in a few things, trying to buy and sell stuff, a bit about domains, but also touch on the magic thing, right? So you had a job at an Italian restaurant, but you also did a bit of magic for them as almost a side hustle.
No. The job in the Italian restaurant was the magician.
I see. Okay.
So that was, I guess that was hobby / wanting to earn money. So as much as I had my passion for business or my wanting to work in business, my childhood hobby was performing magic. And again, from probably, I don't know, 12, 13 years old, that was how I would spend my free time, learning magic tricks, wanting to perform magic tricks. I enjoyed the magic, and then also in my head I was going to be a millionaire, famous magician, or Danny Zuko in Greece, one or the other. So the job came about because I wanted a watch, I wanted a Rolex, and my parents said that I had to go and buy it myself. And I guess the only way I kind of had to do it was to go and try and do something with the magic. I'd done a bit of performing anyway, when I say corporate events, like after dinner magic and stuff like that, where I'd earned myself £100 here, a couple £100 there. So I knew I could do it, and I knew people would like it and pay me. So I went to the local restaurant, which at the time, again, this is 30 plus years ago. This restaurant was very cool. It was like the place to be. Again, there's a lot less restaurants back then than there were now. So anybody who was anybody was there on a Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. So I went to the owner and said, please can I perform a magic here? And they wouldn't pay me. He said I could just do it for experience and tips. Although a couple of weeks later, he started to give me a garlic bread when I left on a night as well. So I was hired for a garlic bread. But I was earning tips only, but doing 200, 300, 400 quid a night on a Friday night, on a Saturday night, which is 16 years old, earning 200 to 400 quid a night is good money now. Never mind back then. And At the time, I never saw it as this, because back then I just wanted to get my hands on some money to go and to go and buy this watch. But in hindsight, it was a very important lesson in the importance of being in the right vehicle again. What is going to take you to where you want to be. And looking back, all my friends would take the piss out of me, basically saying, "You're working for free. They don't pay you." Or they're giving you a garlic bread. Why would you possibly work for free? Completely oblivious to the fact that I should be paying them to work. If they said to me, "You can pay us 100 quid a night to rent space in this restaurant," it would still be the best deal ever, because I'd still be walking home with 200 or 300 quid. And far too often people get caught up on, particularly when it comes to what first jobs people take, and do they get 18 grand a year to go and work for this person, or it's 22 grand a year to work for this person? In the grand scheme of it, the money's negligible. You're better off going to work for somebody else for free if they're going to be the right person to mentor you, to train you, to put you in the direction of where you want to go. If you're walking out of uni, or walking out of school, and someone offers you a job, for example, I don't know, working in ABC business for 30 grand a year, or you mentioned Alan Sugar, or someone says, "Do you want to be Alan Sugar's apprentice for the next 6 months?" And you're gonna have to, not only you're not going to get paid, you're going to have to go and take a night job to be able to buy your lunch. It's an absolute no-brainer, but 99 people out of 100 would say, "Why the fuck am I going to go work for him for free? I want that 25 grand."
And that's such a good point. And we'll come on to all of this. As one of the things I think throughout your story is that you almost had a lifetime worth of experience by the time you got to 30, because you did things like this. And coming back to Alan Sugar, which has become a theme somehow already, is a really good point, because do you remember back in the day when they used to get the job, whereas now they get investment? They got 100 grand a year job or whatever.
Yes.
But they used to always moan 6 months in when they're like, "It's actually a really hard job I've got here." And everyone's like, "Yeah, obviously. That's the whole point, is that you worked really hard to get this job, to then work really hard and be alongside some of Alan Sugar's advisors." And people don't quite get that, do they? They look at like delayed gratification as something that they don't want to look for, especially in this day and age. We want to just win. You've won a TV show, you now have got something to show for it. But in reality, you've just started the whole journey, right? What was your relationship like at school? What was it like with education and the whole schooling system?
I was never interested in it. Just because I guess in my head I was never going to need it. I did all right with my exams. I didn't really put any effort in, and I got okay grades. I'm certainly not saying I didn't put any effort in. I got A stars across the board. Yeah, I did all right. I didn't try very hard, but I did all right. But I never wanted to be there. I was always quite naughty. I got kicked out of everywhere, basically. And again, never. People say, "Oh, what was you got kicked out for?" There was never one particular event. I wasn't. There was not this horrendous story where I burnt the school down, or I was caught selling drugs or whatever. But I was just always just a little prick, really. Just an accumulation of stuff, because I just didn't want to be there.
But I like this. So when we always do tons of research on people, and one of the things that I think comes through with your story is that it's very authentic. Like you on purposely say, I don't have these massive stories that everyone's looking for. Like I did this, and then this inspired me to do that. You're very honest in that, like, I worked medium hard and I got medium good results. Whereas someone would want to tell the story of, like, I didn't do any work and I got A stars and went to like, Harvard or whatever. Did you get the Rolex?
I did, yes, I did.
Nice.
I
Okay,
did.
cool. So what I'm really interested in from here, which is, I think the background's really cool. You gave in to mum and dad and you went to uni, right, to start with.
Very briefly.
But at that time, your dad had invested in a workwear brand, right? So what I'm interested in is what went on in your mindset. What mindset change happened when you went to uni, but saw that your dad had this business, which he wasn't putting too much effort into because he'd already had other things going on, and the opportunity that you saw to go, I could actually run that rather than spend my time at uni.
So it wasn't exactly like that. So basically what happened was he invested in this business, let's say just before I would have been due to go to uni.
Okay.
And at the time, I was kind of talking to my parents about delaying uni and taking a gap year. And I thought, what I'm going to do is go and do this gap year, go and try and earn some money, and that would then prevent me from ever having to go to uni. And my parents had kind of conceptually agreed to it, but I think the reality of me knew that I probably wasn't going to make it big enough in this year to be able to then not have to go back to uni. So if I was going to have to go back to uni anyway, I may as well just get on with it now and not, and not waste the extra year. But then this opportunity came up because my dad had invested in this business where I could start working in there. At the time, I wasn't going to be running. I was just going to be selling, probably doing 2 or 3 days a week working in there. So I decided to go to uni closer to home, so I could still do uni, keep my mum happy, and work and keep me happy. And any of my friends who'd been to uni, for, let's say, the older friends who'd been the year before, whatever, uni was always thought of as this place where you didn't have to do anything. You'd basically sign up for 3 or 4 years, and you'd get a textbook a month to read and 2 or 3 hours of some lectures, and you were just on the piss all the time, basically. My uni couldn't have been any different. I literally went in and I'm given literally fat textbook after fat textbook on day one. I look at my schedule for the week. There's like 20 hours of lectures. There's all this homework. There's all these things. And I thought there is just no way that I can give this uni a proper job and do the work at the same time. I think maybe about 6 weeks, I forget exactly, but so I kind of tried to do the 2 for 6 weeks, but it was just never going to work. And then at that point, I kind of said to my mum, let me leave uni. Let me concentrate on this work now. I've got an opportunity to go here, and I'll and if it doesn't work, I will go back to uni again the next year. I guess kind of what we'd already talked about doing, but with a bit more plan and structure around it. And so I worked in that business. I kind of got to the end of that first year when I was due to go back to uni. I mean, I knew I had no intention of going back, nor was I in a state to, let's say, be able to justify not going back, because yes, I was running this business by that point, but I certainly wasn't making money to be able to not go back to uni. So my mum was adamant that she would not fail in getting me to have some kind of qualification. So I think the deal to not go back to uni was that I was going to do a distance learning accountancy course. So I signed up for SEMA. I don't know if you know SEMA. Yeah. It's like ACCA. So I signed up for SEMA. I didn't finish that either, to be honest. But what
were you doing at uni originally?
Money banking and international finance.
Oh, okay. Super relevant as well. Really helpful stuff.
It was all relevant business.
But really heavy.
Well, the problem with it was though, I'd already done business studies and accountancy for A-level, and I'd spent the previous 5 years, reading every kind of business text I could get my hands on. So business studies as a degree allows or expects for people to come in having done nothing prior to that. So your first year of your 3 years is basically doing not even as much as I'd probably already done for A-levels, never mind for what I'd learned. So as well as it being very time consuming, it was also very boring because, it just allows for, you could have done maths, chemistry, physics at A-level, decided to go into a business degree. So from day one, you've got to start learning everything about business. I'd already done a 2-year business studies A-level, 2-year accountancy A-level, and had all my kind of personal interest in business. So it was tedious to say the least.
I did exactly the same. I did business and economics at A-levels, right. Went and did a business management degree, And like you say, it was pretty basic, but the only ones that I found interesting was the modules on entrepreneurship, where they brought an entrepreneur in and were like, I'm not very good at teaching, but I'm going to try. I'm going to teach you what I do in my business.
Yep.
There was one in each year, like 1, 2, and 3. And I thought that's the only one that I could fully concentrate on, because it's almost like this is what you need to learn. Like you need to learn the resilience, which I know you're really you're big into, and almost the different kinds of skills it takes to be an entrepreneur. I just looked at it and thought, like, the accounting modules or the finance modules, I'm like, yeah, I need that if I'm going to work in a big business, which I did. But as soon as you become an entrepreneur, you start working your own stuff, you're like, I'm missing so many little parts of the jigsaw that I only learned from that one person who was sort of fudging through on a whiteboard but teaching you really cool stuff.
So I always remember, keeping on theme,
Yeah.
We used to go to a lot of these talks, whether it was at a local school or the local theatre or whatever, and one of the people to come and talk at the local theatre was Alan Sugar.
No way.
Yeah, I remember being near the front asking questions.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Do you remember what you asked him?
No.
I saw
idea.
he was on a Oxford University panel recently.
I did see
you
that.
see this?
Yeah, and what did someone had said, can I have a job?
And he said, yeah, no way you can have a job. He's like, people just, like we said earlier, right? People just expect to be given stuff this day and age because stuff is harder. There's more of us and whatever. But I thought his answer was really interesting. If someone is listening to this and hasn't seen that, it's worth going back and having a look at. Okay, so you drop out of uni, you're doing the SEMA thing to keep your mum happy. What's going on in the business though? So is the business struggling? What challenges are you facing?
Okay, so the business was failing in every possible area. So this was a business that had been around for about 30 years prior to my dad's involvement. It was a family business, to be clear. It wasn't my family's business. It was a family who'd had a couple of generations of this business, which had been successful in its glory days, and then had got less and less successful as time had gone on. The pitch that was sold to my dad was that it just really needed a small injection of capital and a little bit of a steer, and it would be back on the straight and narrow. I mean, it couldn't have been any further from the truth. The numbers were something like, literally, he was supposed to put about 30 or 40 grand into this business, and that was it. Within the space of a year, he was in it for about 300 odd grand, and the I mean, nothing was right. You know, the customers who were on contracts had given notice on the contracts. The ones who weren't on contracts had just disappeared. The suppliers didn't want to supply. The staff didn't want to work. The bank didn't want to fund. I mean, everything was a mess. But my dad, as you mentioned earlier, he'd always been in business, and he'd sold his business 6-12 months prior, which I guess is why he was then looking to invest in some other stuff and looking to kind of, I guess, relax. So I'd be, as crazy as it might sound to many, I mean, having done it myself now, I can relate to my dad at the time. To me, it just looked like he was ploughing good money after bad without a care in the world. And I'd be going home, banging my hands on the table, saying, "Come on, they're robbing you. They're wasting your money. You've got to come in and sort this business out." And his attitude was, "Listen, I've had 25 years of business. I've had 30 years of your mother. It's time for a break. I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but right now, I'd rather lose a bit more money than have to kind of come in and work in a business that I don't want to work in." So that was how I effectively convinced him to let me go in there and have a go at it myself. I think his attitude was not so much, "Oh, Matt's very capable of doing this." It was like, "Well, Matt can't fuck it up any more than these guys are doing. So I'm sick of hearing you moan at us at home as well. So go in and do your worst." And that was effectively how it began. I'd spent the first 6, 9, 12 months working in that business just in sales. I'd started effectively as a sales executive to a sales manager. I remember driving my little red Daewoo around the UK in the days before we had sat nav. I used to have this big map which I'd never had any interest in reading. I'd look at the map and think, well, I've got to get around Leicester. I'd pull off the motorway in Leicester, and all I'd ever do is just wind the window down and say, "Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to wherever?"
Nice.
And they'd tell me, "Oh, it's this, there." I'm like, all right, I've kind of forgotten, so I'll do a mile in this direction and stop for the next bit. I mean, it's bonkers to think that there was no sat nav. And so, how do we survive?
I don't know how we got around. Do you know what? Even now, if I can't get Waze to load, I get a bit lost. I need Waze. Okay, so do you almost think your dad saw that as a test bed for you?
No.
He literally was like, just stop moaning.
I think it was probably more just stop moaning. Yeah.
Okay, and you were in that business for 3 years.
So from that point on, I was in for 3 years, and effectively I kind of went in and we started from scratch. Got rid of everybody from a staffing perspective, from a customer perspective, we didn't really have any customers anyway, but we needed to rebuild the business from. I mean, it wasn't that we needed to rebuild from scratch. We needed to tear down and rebuild. And the business had always been very much built upon a small number of large customers, old school big contracts to Arriva buses, to Metro bus, these kind of big UK transport institutions. And we wanted to, well, it was a combination of, we wanted to get away from the reliance on these dominant people, but also we weren't capable of winning these contracts. I mean, we were up against big, capable businesses with good finances and good track record who were capable of winning these contracts. We couldn't win them, so what was the point in competing in that arena? So we simplified the business model. It became a catalog based business. So we kept in. What we wanted to do was have a product mix that was transferable between different verticals. And I guess at the time, looking back, these are the skills we learn nowadays about niche marketing, etc. I mean, back then it was probably all just different accidents. I'm thinking, well, I can't afford to buy 7 different types of product, so I can only afford to buy black trousers and white shirts and yellow high visibility jackets. So that's the product we've got. But how can I make that look as wide as possible? Well, I'll go on. Put a bus driver in it to make it look like it's a transport range. I'll go and put a security guard in it, make it look like it's a security guard range. Put a builder in it, make it look like it's for builders. So we basically had a catalog based business, selling to these various verticals. And this is what the internet was just beginning then as well. Yeah. I mean, we'd normally call people, we'd send the occasional emails. We were building this website, which was a crazy thing. They certainly weren't buying on the website. They could look on the website to see what the products were, and then give us a call.
But it was like the best test bed for you to do all the problem solving that you dreamt about as a teenager.
Absolutely, because what I say is everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Nothing was right. Okay, yes, I was given a business on a plate, but I was given the most horrendous business imaginable. So I had to learn about the customer, I had to learn about the supplier, I had to learn about hiring, learn about firing, learn about operations, and learning about them when they were all going wrong. And I always say, you don't learn from the things that go right, you learn from the things that go wrong, 100%. And everything conceivable went wrong. So
completely, like if you see some entrepreneurs now that maybe they've got to success, but they've never faced an issue, and they're like, this is just a J-curve of just success. Yeah. And then they hit one tiny bump and it all comes falling down because they've never had that resilience, right? You need to be hit to be able to grow and to learn. So what do you think, if you had to say, what was the most important lesson you learned in that business that you then took into the next one to make it so successful? I just want to briefly interrupt this podcast so I can talk to you about Nutrition Kitchen, who have kindly sponsored this episode. As entrepreneurs who are looking to stay as healthy as possible, fueling ourselves with high quality food without breaking the bank or wasting time can be tough day to day. Nutrition Kitchen solves that issue by delivering incredible meals to your door, tailored to your diet, whether you're trying to lose weight, build muscle, or maintain balance. They change their menus all the time so you can choose from a variety of dishes and leave the monotony of meal prepping behind. Now, back to our guest.
I think it wasn't so much a lesson, but it was, let's say, a tactic that I learned to manage the cash flow. Okay. As a business, we never had enough cash. I mean, it was a business where we'd have to buy all the stock up front, to then sell it piece by piece, and we're always juggling credit terms, always trying to get customers to pay on time, whilst always trying to not pay our suppliers on time, and find that happy medium. And I think playing with the cash flow, both to grow a business and just to survive in existing businesses is something that I learned by accident from an early age, and even to today I'm absolutely ruthlessly playing with, because I think two things really. I think I've always done my best work when my back's up against a wall. And I also always know that if you really stretch yourself, you can make something work. But if you get it easy, you'll never get it back. And so to put that into a real example with money, very often I'll have businesses that I'm invested in that are short on cash, and let's just pick a number, whatever. Just say the cash flow is 10 grand short this week. And the people running that business will always say to me, Matt, please can you put 10 grand in for us? We'll pay it back next week, or we'll pay it back next month. And 99 times out of 100, the answer is always no. Because I know that if that money comes in, it's never, ever, ever coming back. But if I make you work, if I make you sweat, if I make you stretch, you'll find a way to get creative and to get through it. Now, listen, if a business is fucked, that's it. Obviously, that's a completely different story. I mean, obviously, if it's a non-profitable business, that's starved of cash, that's different. But if you're growing a business, or if you're just going through seasonal peaks and troughs, there's normally always a way to manage it. Whereas if you start just putting money in, it'll just get lost in the ether, and it'll just never come back again. And so I think it makes you a lot more protective of cash, and B, it just makes you more creative. When you've got to think about these things, it makes you have a more creative business.
I like that a lot. I think at the minute, what we're seeing certainly around us is that people are getting lost or confused by the MRR graph that they're going after, and they just want to see it continuously go up. And if you speak, we spoke about before this, people like Dan Priestley or Alex Hormozy are these people who have got a lot of success, or yourself, to be honest. And you realise it's actually success is peaks and troughs the whole way. But people they zoom so far in, especially over the summer, for example, in Dubai, when everyone leaves and they go, oh God, my business is going to struggle now. And they see a little bit of a trough. But actually you just zoom out a bit further and go, you're still going up. You're still growing. Just don't get obsessed with the small bits.
Yep.
What I think is really interesting about what you said about, we'll go on to funding, but about uni, is that, what is uni now? £12,000 a year in the UK?
I don't know, to be honest.
Something like that.
I'm about to find out.
You're about to find out. Something like that. And maybe back in your day, it was probably £3,000 a year. I wonder how much someone would pay now to be given a business that's struggling and say you've got 3 years just to learn and see what happens. Way more valuable than uni these days, I would have thought.
It is. And I think people obviously hear that concept more now, but I still don't think most people would take that option.
True. It's probably not good for your mental health as well, just to jump into that. Okay, so we've skirted around a bit that you've got this workwear business. You obviously learned a lot, and then you went on to the next business.
So I did about 3 years in the workwear business. We went from kind of £300,000 loss to £30,000 profit.
But the next business and the lessons that you took then became the most successful strip club chain in the UK.
It did. Now,
wild.
There was a little, not so much a stepping stone, but I didn't go from workwear to strip clubs. I went from the workwear business to leisure in general.
Yes.
So I knew I wanted to be in leisure. I didn't know I wanted to be in strip clubs. I just wanted to be in bars and clubs. So I opened a bar in the city centre and also a couple of pubs on the outskirts, which performed so. But what I realised I was missing from those, and just going back to the cash flow lesson, I mean, I bought those units by learning to meddle with the cash flow as well. And a friend of mine at the time taught me even more extended cash flow games, really, where, I mean, this is back in the days of checks.
Nice. Okay.
and what we did with one of these pubs I bought, I forget the exact figures, but basically I was going to be able to buy this pub for the price of the stock that was in there. They were just effectively going to hand the lease over, and we timed it, so we went in on a Friday night, completed the purchase on a Friday, paid for the stock by check, which wasn't going to clear until the following Wednesday, and then traded the arse off that pub over the weekend to make sure that we'd sold the stock in time for Wednesday for the check to clear, and then bought another week's stock on credit, and if carried on. Managed to make it work for that, but these pubs and the bar in town, they were never going to pull up any trees, and what I realised that they were missing was different streams of income with high margin other than just selling beer alone. So all the 3 units I had, we just sold alcohol, on a modest margin, 65% type margin. When I looked at the really successful venues, they had other income streams. So it could have been selling food, it could have been money from the door, it could have been entertainment like DJs and things, reasons why you could charge more money and get higher margin. And I'd been spending a lot of my free time in the local strip club, which I got to know the manager, got to know the staff and the girls, and understood how their business model worked, and realised that the economics of the strip club business was exactly what my business was missing, with 3 different streams of income, 2 of which were 100% margin. The third one, which was the alcohol, was much better margin than I'd be getting, because it was effectively a captive market.
Sure, yeah.
If you've got a pub, the price of a local pint, whatever, £2.10, £2.20 back in those days, then that's the price. If you're selling it for £2.10, I can't go and sell it for £3.50. If I'm selling that same beer in a strip club, you don't care what the price of the beer is. I could sell you the same thing for £5, and you pay it. So I realised these were the economics of the business I needed, and I poached the manager who was working there to ask him to come and be effectively my right hand man. And we found a unit in Wakefield. Couldn't find one in Leeds. I wanted to be in Leeds, but found one in Wakefield. Opened that in March 2004. I think it was March 2004, and that was the first one. And that was, I guess, in terms of everything I'd done up until that point in business, that was the first thing that was really successful. Everything else was, I got paid. It was a learning curve. I earned a wage that I could have probably earned anywhere else. So I could have probably earned more somewhere else. But that was the first thing that really took off, that hit the ground running.
What? That's credible. And so what age were you when you opened that first one?
23.
So 23. So how did you get the cash flow to work? Because that seems like a big part of your story. You're really good at organising the funds to get to that first place to be open.
So don't hold me to the exact numbers, but
Sure.
rough terms. There was the venue in Wakefield was about 365 grand, I think it was, to buy this venue. It was a freehold. I mean, it shows how long ago this was.
Yeah.
And it was big. It was a big lump, like 10,000 square feet or something. And I went to see a bank manager in Wakefield at the local HSBC, which was literally, I can remember it like yesterday, like 50 yards around the corner. There was a bank manager there, Andrew Bennett.
Nice.
And this is back in the days when these banks had some local discretion to be able to make their own decisions. And this guy Andrew ran the local unit. He was able to sign off a loan of up to £1 million. And he agreed that he would fund the purchase of the bar for me. So they were going to give 70% of the 365 grand. I had to put the change in, and then when I'd fitted it out, if it was worth more than it was when I bought it, they would then refinance it for me again on another 70%. And we projected that by the time it was fitted out, it was probably going to be worth £1 million. So he'd lend about 700 grand at that point. So rough numbers were, it was going to be 365 grand to buy it, about 300 grand to fit it out. So I'd be in for kind of 665-ish. If it was then worth £1 million and I could get the 70% loan to value, I'll be able to get all my money back out and I'd be okay. But I needed about 100 grand to put into it, and I needed the 300 grand for the builders. I had the 100 grand, give or take. Well, I had about 130, 140 grand at this point, because I'd as well as the business I'd worked in, I had bought 2 or 3 properties, just some student properties in Headingley back in Leeds, which I bought in about 1998 and sold in about 2002, and they'd gone up and I'd sold them. So I kind of cashed out everything I had, and the money from the pubs and stuff. So I had my 100 odd grand to put down on the purchase of the building, and I had the money for the first week to pay the contractors of the bar. So buy the building, pay the contractors the first week's money, and they start doing the job. But that's me completely out of money. So week 2 comes along. These builders come asking for the second week's payment. This is the second week of about 12 weeks or whatever it was. And I thought, if I tell them now, they're going to cut the losses. But if I can blag them for a few weeks and get them so deep in, I've got a fighting chance of making them see it through. So I kind of made an excuse for week 2, excuse for week 3. And by the time they're 4 weeks in, I sit down with these guys and have to say, listen, I've got to fess up. I haven't got the money to finish this job off. Obviously, they weren't too happy about it, but I said, listen, we've got 2 choices here. I said, you can beat me up, string me up, do what you want, but you're not going to get paid, or you can see this job through. I showed them the offer of finance with the bank. I said, the bank will finance this at the end, but I just need to get to the end. I said, to get me to the end, charge me some penalties. Do whatever you want. Put yourself an extra drink on there, but let's get to the end, and you'll get out of this with all your money and more. I'll get the venue open. I'm sure we'll all be friends again by then, and you might even be able to do unit number 2 with me, unit number 3 with me, and ultimately that's what we did. After a lot of shouting and argy-bargy, they agreed to see the job through. Got to the end. Andrew Bennett and his HSBC branch were good to their word. They refinanced the unit, paid off the builders, and the rest is history.
I think that what's really cool there, I think, is that you're so young to have that financial literacy, but also the confidence and the foresight to do all that stuff. Where did that appetite for risk come from, do you think? Or did you not see it as risk at the time, maybe?
I mean, listen, it's risk, but I guess I see it probably as I didn't really have a choice, because ultimately, everyone's going to have their own view on risk and their own view on morality, because I'm sure some people will look at that as a lovely creative story, and some will say Matt's a total crook. Matt's a total crook who tried to spank some builders. But I guess the way I saw it was I would happily risk the lot, because the 120, 130 grand that I had to my name was neither here nor there. It wasn't the millions that I wanted, and I would rather go all in and try and double it, triple it, quadruple it, and risk losing it, because if I lost it, it wouldn't be too complicated for me to go and make it again. So I think that's probably where my appetite for risk has always really been based around the fact that I know I can make it back again.
Yeah, so that comes back down to confidence and financial literacy, right? You understood, I can do this if you help me do that. You're just looking at solving the problem again. It's all problem solving. I mean,
obviously, as I've gotten older, it's not that my appetite for risk has gotten worse, has gotten softer. I mean, I might not bet the ranch in the way that I would have done back then, but I still will happily bet substantial chunks of capital, just because I know that A, if I don't, I'll be bored, and B, as long as I've still got the roof over my head, then the rest of it I will get back again.
I think that's really cool. The way you look at it is really cool. There's a stigma around strip clubs, but I'm really interested in. Obviously, it wasn't a new thing when you started it in the late 90s, but how did you look at it and go from 0 to 70 units in the end?
Not all strip clubs.
Sure, but leisure.
Yeah, so strip clubs, I mean, they've been in England probably since about 1996, 1997, and we're talking about 2003. So they just started to become a bit more socially acceptable. I mean, I say a bit more because, if you'd have gone back to, let's say, 1999, 2000 time, it was very much strip clubs. They were thought of almost the same as brothels. No one would ever admit to going in one. Okay. By the time you get into kind of 2003, 2004 and onwards, they were, Spearmint Rhino had come to the UK. And they'd obviously done a massive job of promoting the strip club industry. Peter Stringfellow was still around back then, and he was still a kind of a tabloid character, and it was just starting to become more known about, more. I don't know if socially acceptable is the right word, but let's say less social stigma. Yeah. Whereby. It went from people denying that they'd been anywhere near a strip club to knowing that business owners would take clients in there for corporate entertainment, that guys might even take the girlfriend with them for a bit of a laugh. It had kind of gotten to that stage by the time we opened. We did a good job of really pushing the image in that way as well, because I'd always had a vision to grow this as a brand, and I was always very much front and center of this brand, which I think was probably a combination of marketing foresight that if we wanted to drive a brand forward, it needed to be in the mainstream, and also probably my ego of wanting to be a 24-year-old front and center strip club owner. But as time went on, it just became more and more acceptable. So I mean, we did a good drive in having ladies' nights, in having couples' nights, in advertising in mainstream kind of areas, and just not hiding anything about it. I mean, the industry at the time, obviously, other than Spearmint Rhino and Stringfellows, but the industry was very much thought of as either strip clubs were owned by gangsters to wash money, or strip clubs at best were a rich man's plaything, where he'd bought a strip club for a bit of fun, but it was always going to be run like shit. It was never going to be run like a proper business. And we ran ours very much as a proper business, with sales, with marketing, with finance, with nothing to hide.
And how quickly did it grow? Because obviously, I think there was a big event in your life when you were 28, right? So, but in those 4 years, you grew so quickly.
So we opened the first one in March 2004. And the second one, I bought a failing spearmint rhino in November 2004. So I'd kind of had two by the end of that year. And then it was kind of two or three a year from then after, really. And the peak was, I think we opened the final one around Christmas time of 2007, end of 2007, beginning of 2008.
Always just spotting opportunities where something's failing or there's a demand in this area.
The only failing, we bought two failing ones. One was a spearmint rhino, and one was just an independent club in Blackpool. The rest of them were just vacant units that we opened.
Okay, so just spotting opportunities. And so was this again back to like the cash flow piece, where you're able to spot an opportunity, leverage some cash to open that place and get it running within the first month or so? In all of the clubs we opened, so at this point, prior to the strip clubs, I'd never borrowed money. Other than the mortgage on the houses and the mortgage on the building, I didn't know about asset finance or overdrafts or any kind of cash flow loans. Any funding that I'd done had just been juggling my own cash flow, effectively, delaying supplier payments or whatever. But I didn't actually know about loans. And within a month or two of the Wakefield club being open, I got introduced to a finance broker who started to teach me about asset finance and show me how I could borrow money to go and buy new equipment, or I could use their money to refinance equipment that I already owned. And that was really the journey that then set me on being able to open more clubs, and B was also ultimately the architect of the downfall. But yeah, that's where the cash flow came from, or the cash came from. Borrowing it from different sources, and I effectively spent 3, 4, 5 years, I would say, learning how to borrow money, finding lenders that you would never have even known existed. This is alternative lending before the word alternative lender even existed. And probably 50% of my time was spent finding and courting new lenders. So cool. So what you did was you basically found the business model that was working but was being run poorly with a bad stigma, and then turned it around and was like, there's an opportunity here, and there always will be if I run it like a business and turn it into a business machine. And then you actually just found a really good way of funding it. But then the warning signs, there's probably very, very few warning signs before the financial crash in 2008, right?
Well, the problem was, and in hindsight, it was obvious at the time. I was too wrapped up in it. But the problem was, all of this funding that we were taking on was very expensive, and it was very short term. The expensive wasn't so much an issue because we were very profitable, but most of this money was supposed to be paid back over 2 years or paid back over 3 years. Really, in hindsight, it should have been 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. We could have sustained the interest rates. We could have continued borrowing from these people, but we needed long term loans. It's funny because people always say to me now, well, looking back then, what would you have done different? And the answer is, what I could have done different is all totally hypothetical. Yes, what I should have done differently is borrow money over 10 years, not borrow money over 2 years. But there was no one to lend it over 10 years, which is why I was doing that. So really, I kind of only had two choices, which was either do it and fuck it up like I did, or not do it at all.
But you were taking the risk, right? You were taking the risk, and it was all going well. And then you're 28, and you have to declare.
So
bankruptcy.
28. I was 27. So it was the beginning of 2008. I started to realise that that the cash flow was unsustainable. There was no one else that we could kind of borrow money from. We were unable to plug holes anymore. And I went back to all my lenders probably around June of that year to say, listen, guys, we've got a problem. We can't pay you back over the profile that we're supposed to pay you back over. I need to agree something with you, whether that's over 5 years or 3 years, whatever it is, it needs to be longer than it is, but work with me and we'll all get out of this together. And they, some said yes because I had good relationships with them, but a lot of them were saying, well, no, we don't need to agree anything with you because we've got your personal guarantee. Yeah. I was like, well, you have, but I've given 45 million quid worth of personal guarantees. It's not going to stretch that far. And they were, they were saying, well, you'll find a way. You don't want to go bankrupt. You'll find a way to make it work. And as much as I would have loved to have found a way to make it work, I couldn't. And I always maintain actually that if this conversation would have happened probably 12 months later, I might be telling a very different story today. But back then, this was very much the beginning of the credit crunch. We all knew it was coming, but these lenders hadn't taken a big beating at this. Well, they probably hadn't even lost any money at this point. They just knew something was coming. And there was me saying to them, extend your terms for me. And they just felt, we've never done this for anyone before. We don't need to do it now. Fast forward a year, these lenders have been fucked by everybody. I mean, massive write-offs left, right and centre. And if I'd have gone back to them then and said, can we extend my terms? They'd be rolling out the red carpet. If I'd have said, I'm going to give you 50p in the pound, they'd have probably been high-fiving me. Yeah. But it was just very, very much at the beginning of the crisis. And, everybody said no, or most people said no, and when the first one, sent the demand, there was nothing to really fight for. There was no point fighting. If I'd have beaten this lender, or rather delayed it, there was nothing to beat, because I owed the money. If I'd have delayed it, then the next one would have got me. If I'd have delayed, then the next one would have got me. So It was just time to wave the white flag and take my medicine.
It's literally the film The Big Short, isn't it? At the start where they're learning about what's going to happen, and as soon as everyone starts to sniff what's actually going to happen, that they're just a knock-on effect, and there's just almost like stuff was being done before actually anything had actually occurred, but it's just like panic through the market, which I imagine just affected everyone at the time.
And the speed it happens at is incredible. I mean, it almost unbelievable, and unless you've lived it. That, I mean, as of June 2008, I still had a 999 credit rating. I was still borrowing money at that point, both business wise and personally. And then from between, let's say, June and August, everything had gone. And September, I think it's the 9th of September 2008 or 7th of September 2008, I was made personally bankrupt.
I actually have written down in my notes here when I was looking at this stuff, I was like, this is actually pretty cool though. And I know it's your personal journey,
lovely.
but what's really cool about it is that the whole circle makes sense. Like, you always want to be a problem solver. You learned a lot from your parents. You did the uni journey, made millions in your 20s. And you, like I said earlier, you had a lifetime worth of lessons by the time you were 30 or 28, 27, what you want to call it. If you then look past that event, if that's like a turning point in your life, just take me through how you've now lent over $500 million to UK businesses, because you were someone looking for funding, learned a lot of lessons about funding, and now you're on the flip side and you support businesses, very, very big businesses, lots of businesses, whatever. Like, just take me through that shift in mindset, because you've obviously got a lot to give now financially, but also in terms of the coaching you can give.
So I guess every business I've kind of ended up in, or every avenue I've gone down, has always really been a result of an experience or a story. And pre-bankruptcy, I'd already been spending so much time borrowing money from these different lenders that a lot of my mates or peers knew that I was borrowing money, that I had access to lenders that nobody even knew existed. And so I had plenty of mates who were in business, maybe successful, maybe semi-successful, who were 50 grand light here, 100 grand light there. And they were asking me if I could help basically introduce them to these lenders. So from about 2006, I'd always started off as a finance broker anyway. Alongside the other things I was doing, and then from broking, I also started to do a bit of lending. I got a funding line from NatWest Bank back then, effectively to allow us to have some money to on lend, and I also got an investor as well. So from 2006 to 2008, let's say pre-bankruptcy, I'd already been doing a little bit of lending. So I was still borrowing heavily, but I also had a business that was doing some lending. So I always said I'd learned to be a borrower, so I'd learned to be a lender by being a borrower. Then when everything went bust and I had to start from scratch again, I needed a business, I needed an income stream. So I started doing the finance broking. I wasn't lending at that point because I didn't have anything to lend, but I was effectively connecting lenders with borrowers. And then I guess the squashed story of those kind of 12 years from, 14 years from 2010 to now is that went from broking some finance deals to finding some investors again who would effectively invest in me to be able to lend. And back then it was tiny amounts. An investor can say, I'll give you 100 grand, or the next one might have given me 200 grand. And then that just grew and grew as time went on. And I can always remember there's probably been 3 or 4 turning points in the lending business where, from getting lots and lots of little 100 grands, somebody came along and gave me £1 million. And then there was another guy that I built a relationship with who had access to a platform that, over the course of a few years, I probably got 10 million out of him. And then I met another guy who had access to a fantastic international set of investors, investors who were capable of doing 4 or 5 million quid each. There've been these various different turning points, not so much turning points, but step ups along the way. And really, the model for the last 14 years has been raising money from investors and lending it to businesses. But bringing my story and experience in is that we lend to people that the banks won't. I say won't. It's not that they won't, but maybe they won't do it quick enough, or maybe they won't lend quite as much, or maybe there's a quirk. People always come to us because of speed or flexibility. But then not just providing the money, but providing the experience. Now that could be experience also in just being able to lend the money, because I can look at something with a different set of eyes and see solutions where another lender might just see problems. Or a lot of the time, I'll deal with a business who thinks they want capital, and maybe they do need capital because they need to plug a hole and they've got a problem. But I can see how they can actually get through that problem, not necessarily without money, but very, very often, you'll see businesses that are struggling, and making this numbers up. But let's just say a business turns over £1 million, makes 100 grand profit, but it's got 700 grand's worth of debt in it. And very often I'll get business owners like that come to me and say, can I borrow 700 grand? What for? Oh, well, to refinance this 700 grand's worth of debt. I'd be like, how the fuck do you ever think you're paying it back? Right, you're making 100 grand a year. If I look at your accounts, you've been making 100 grand a year, give or take, for the last, however long. How you need to pay this 700 grand back to me over, say, 2 years. And they're like, yeah, we're going to make more profit. You're not going to go from 100 grand to 700 grand because you've got all these problems in the business. And nobody, I guess it's a kind of the delusion and they can't see the wood for the trees, but when you're in there, no one wants to accept that there's a problem. And I can always try and, let's say, reassure people by the fact that, listen, I was in your position once, and I was as deluded as you are when I was in that position. I mean, if I look back to mid-June 2008, I would never have thought I was going to go bankrupt. I mean, looking back now, I was basically probably bankrupt from about 2006. Yeah. But if I look at how I was back then, I really thought if I borrowed a bit more money, I could fix this and get out of that, and everything would tick along. And I really needed someone. I said I needed someone to hang me upside down and shake the reality into me. But even if they did, as business owners, we're optimistic and we're emotional, and I would never have seen it anyway. But I guess what I try and educate into the business owners that I'll deal with is, look, you've got parts of a decent business in there. You've also got a load of shit in there as well. So let's get rid of the shit. Let's fix the good bits, and let's make it be a, I know you don't want to think about words like bankruptcies or insolvencies or administrations, but if we do this in the right way, we can put this business through a process. We can take it out the other side, get rid of this 700 grams of the debt, and I'll still fund you. I'll fund you on the other side. But when it's a clean business that's got viability, not just when I'm plugging your 700 grand hole, because effectively all I'm doing is making someone else's 700 grand problem my problem. If I'm really lucky, some other idiot will come along and take me out. But the reality is that one of us is going to be left holding the baby.
I guess the truth of it is we just, as business owners, we don't know what we don't know, do we? We just think we can solve these issues, and actually sometimes we can't. But what's interesting, go on.
I think it's both. You're right. We don't know what we don't know, but we do have probably inflated opinions of our ability as well.
100%, yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you started off needing funding, then you did lending, but throughout the whole process, really, you were learning so much about business, which now is so valuable to those people that need the lending, isn't it? Like you've solved so many problems that from the age of 27, 28, like we said, you're able to actually solve a myriad of issues for businesses now, which is why I can see, like, with, I saw you speak at an event, a big event this year. We actually can't remember if it was this year or last year, can we? But
this was the Dubai one.
Yeah, 10 months ago or so, I think. And you were talking about network actually, because funding and lending, and especially the way that you do it, is about who you know, right? You've got access to people that we don't know are actually lenders, but you do. And so how important is network for you, but also for business owners who are looking to scale?
Well, I think your network is absolutely crucial. Whether you're a business owner in general, whether you're a business owner looking to scale, or just wherever you are in life. Because I mean, ultimately, I guess people talk about network and almost give it some financial connotations or think about it in business terms. But I mean, your network is just really, who have you got access to? And, taking it to its most, let's say, simple and personal level, if you have no friends and you don't know anyone, then you're going to have a pretty lonely shit life. If you're not interested in business at all, but you just want to go on the piss every night, well, you need some people to go out there and have fun with, and that would be your network of people. So I guess ultimately, whatever it is you want to achieve, wherever it is you want to get to, or whatever it is you want to learn, that needs to come from somebody. So ultimately, the bigger your network, the more opportunities you're going to have, and to really get the best opportunities. And to get the best value out of relationships, you need to have built these long before you need them. I've been networking, I think, tremendously, probably since my early 20s. Never back then did I probably understand it like I did now. I mean, I think I would still have applied many of the tactics that I apply now back then, but I would have done it by accident. But I think one of the biggest mistakes people make with networking is well because they hate it. Well, they say they hate it, but they hate it because they do it wrong. But because they hate it, they don't do it until they think they need to do it. So, for example, they'll go, "I've just been fired. I need to go and get a job. I better go and do some networking to get a job." Okay, I'm not saying it's impossible. Sure, of course, you can go and do some networking and get a job. But what you really need to have done is built that network over the last 10 years so that you were getting offered a job before you even got fired, or that you've got someone that you can call in a favour from because you've been building value with that person for the last few years. Of course, you could plonk me in the middle of whatever, plonk me in Germany tomorrow and tell me, Matt, you've got to go and get a job. Of course, I'll do a bit of network. I'll do some knocking on doors and I'll get myself a job. But that's going to be a completely different outcome to if I'd been cultivating relationships in Germany for the last 10 years, where I thought, oh shit, now I need something.
It's almost exactly the same as business, right? The ideal business is oversubscribed. Like before you even put a product out there, everyone wants a bit of you. They want a bit of your personal brand or your business brand or your product. Same with a job, isn't it? You want to be asked to work for other people all the time.
Absolutely. And I say job, apply that theory to anything, whether you're looking for funding, whether you're looking for customers to sell to, partners to work with, job, whether it's a girlfriend or a boyfriend, whatever you're looking for, the vaster your network and the deeper your relationships, the better the outcome's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can sort of see that throughout your story, right? You've spoken about the network and the power of people and learning and making mistakes actually, and resilience the whole way through. Matt, before we finish, I want to talk to you a bit about philanthropy. Mm-hmm. A lot of people we speak to have thought very differently about business or life, and that's why they've become successful. And I'm really interested in that. That's why we talk about thinking differently and that kind of storyline. Not a lot of people actually, some people then try and make a big impact with the money they've made. Some people don't, but I'm always interested in people that do. I know you do a lot of work through your foundation with terminally ill children. I'd love to hear about at what point in your life did you make the sort of decision to go, I'm now going to really find a purpose here in who can I help and how and why?
I mean, there was never a point when I kind of woke up and thought, oh, I need to start being philanthropic, and I guess as great as the outcome is for the people who are the recipient of that charity, I normally think when someone decides, oh, I need to give back and make a big impact, it's been done from a PR perspective. And I listen, if the people get the money, then happy days if people get the money. But I don't think these entrepreneurs woke up and found God and decided that they needed to go and save children. I think they probably fucked something up and need to get a bit of good press and decided that the best way to do it do, it's from charity. But I think, probably most people are intrinsically good anyway, and whether that's putting £1 in a charity box or buying some cookies off the Girl Scouts, I think we all do whatever we can in our limits or remit for charity as time goes on. So I'd always been charitable in that respect. I always, would help someone if I could help them. But the actual, getting deep into charity happened by accident for me. That, where is it now? Probably mid 2016, 2017. I was at a football match, met a young lad just in the kind of director's box at lunchtime who was raising money for a cerebral palsy operation, and I kind of assumed he was there to raise the last bits of the money they needed. And having got talking to him and his mum, I thought, they must only be a couple of grand short. I'll give them the money they need, and they can have had a good day. When I got talking to them, it transpired that they basically, as much as they'd been fundraising for about a year, they'd raised about 5% of the 50 grand or whatever it was that they needed. So I kind of said to them, listen, I was going to give you the money you needed, but I can't. I've just met you. I can't give you 50 grand. So I agreed with them that I would kind of go pound for pound on any fundraising they did between now and Christmas, and ultimately ended up helping him raise. I think he raised about 16 grand, so I gave him 16 grand, and then I gave a bit of a top up to get there. And at the time I did it, like I said, there was no angle, and there was certainly no future plan either. It was never like, this is the start of my philanthropic journey. But having helped him raise the money, seen him had the operation, and then seen the success of it from the other end, I guess I saw a few things, which was, one, I enjoyed being part of the process and the outcome, and I guess that's the kind of mutually beneficial, selfish bit of charity, isn't it? That as much as the other person gets helped, you feel warm and fuzzy inside for helping them. But also, I saw very much how these guys, they didn't just need money; they needed complete hand holding all the way along the process, because invariably the people who often need these operations or surgery or life changing or saving bits the most are also for whatever reason the people who can afford it least, which also typically means they're probably lacking other bits of financial acumen, other bits of life skills. And I remember helping these guys not just with the money, but how do we book a hotel, when where do we stay when the operations happen, what do we do afterwards? And there was so much to do with it. So I realised these guys don't just need money, they need hand-holding. And I thought that I really much enjoyed being part of the process. And I thought, I've got a good network of people. It wouldn't be very hard for me to, rustle together a few charity dinners here and there. And I there was no master plan at the time. It was just very much, how can we raise money, have fun, and help people? Because my other, let's say, from a having fun perspective, I normally find that the charity dinners you go to are shit. I know it's like down in Bath, but you go to a charity dinner in Leeds, and it's in the function room of the local rugby club, getting served some crappy chicken where you're bidding for a rugby shirt from some guy you've never heard of, and you're only going because it's your mate who's put the event on, and you're kind of doing him a favour. So I thought, well, look, I'd like to put 2 or 3 events a year on. We can raise some money, but as much as I'm going to be calling in favours from my friends when we start, I want to make the events so good that people will genuinely want to come back to them again for year 2 or for year 3. And I think, I'm not going to go down a tangent on how do you raise money for charity, but I think one of the biggest mistakes people make when it comes to raising money for charity is to forget that charity is a business, and that they think, oh well, it's charity, that's why people should come. No, people only have so much money to give, and if you want to raise big money, you've got to basically give someone something in return, and giving them the fuzzy feeling of helping poorly kids it's a bit of something, but it's not the whole way. If you're really going to extract big money from someone, you've got to give them big value, and that is about having the best event with the coolest celebs or whatever it may be. And the mistake people make is just going, well, it's a charity night. People are just going to come and raise money for charity. So I wanted to make the events good. I wanted to tap into my network. And then we kind of had this slogan, which was, we don't make our difference, we make the difference. And again, just from a personal perspective, and it's always very difficult when talking to people about their charities, because it's not that one charity's right and one's wrong, or one's better or one's worse. But I always felt that I can't get emotionally attached to sending a few £100 to save malaria in a foreign country. I can't see it. I can't see the results and the reaction. I'd much rather do something closer to home where I can kind of see the results of what we've done. And it was never about, let's say, putting the most money in. It was just about having ownership and visibility of the situation. And again, because I want to do that with my cash, but if I go and raise money from other people, I want to be able to, in good conscience, tell them and show them where the money's gone. And I can't say to you, look, come and spend your time with me, give me your money, and I'm going to ship you cash off to Africa, for example, where it's probably going to have 30% lopped off the top by some charities' running costs, and we're never going to see the results of what we do. So there was no, like most of what I've done along the years, there was no great master plan. It just kind of felt right at the time that this accidental charity raising for Alfie was gonna move into something a bit more formal, and that's kind of where we are now.
I think it's brilliant, and I completely agree that even the word charity now is almost like people just think it's giving, but profit for good. If you look at it like that, is such a cool way of looking at it. Like, we're all going to benefit from this, but it's for an amazing cause. It's
a business where where we're going to generate turnover, we're going to create profit, but all of that profit will go and help someone in need.
Absolutely,
but you got to run it like a business.
Absolutely, Matt. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. If you like these episodes, feel free to subscribe to our Healthy Hustle newsletter below, where you'll get behind the scenes information from our guests, as well as from the studio operator who helps us create these cinematic episodes. It's also full of business advice and tips, and it will help you join the community of healthy entrepreneurs.